Playing Hardball in Local Search, How to Get ROI with a Limited Budget with Seth Price, episode 274. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel. I'm going to keep this intro really brief because it's going to be the same for these consecutive episodes. Today we have a replay from our annual planning session event that we're currently running. If you haven't signed up for it yet and you're hearing this episode and it's before December 23rd, join us for the rest of the sessions. You can do that by going to profitwithlaw.com/annual planning. If you're catching this after or during and you want to access the replays, this is an audio version of a video that was done live. So there are slide decks, there are you can see the body language of the speaker. You may want to go and watch the video. You may also want an easy way to download the resources that were shared on this or the other sessions. So you can do that by registering for the event. We'll send you to the replay page every morning, or you can go straight to profitwithlaw.com/planning replay, profitwithlaw.com/planning replay to access the replay page for the event. You can access all of these links by going to this episode's show notes page at profitwithlaw.com/274. And without further ado, here is the replay of that session.
When I looked at sort of delivering ROI and knowing your audience, there's a whole spectrum of what could be done. People know that I'm really passionate about digital marketing. It's how I started my own firm with 2 people and grew that to 40 lawyers, DC, Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina. And then within Blu Shark, the idea was, okay, for people that have the resources, what can we do to replicate what we've done at Price Benowitz? That was sort of our test kitchen. And how do we replicate this for others? And when I'm looking at sort of the market today, everybody has to decide, like, you have limited resources, both time and money, and how do you allocate those effectively to be able to get digital marketing results that can move the needle for your organization? And for me, one of the things I always look at is, what do you love to do? That's sort of one of those thought questions that I come to first, because based on what you love to do, if you love to do it or like doing it at least, you're more likely to do those activities. So what I ask people is, if you hate to write, you better find, as we talk about the different elements of digital marketing, you better find something that's going to get written content for you, because it's not going to happen. If you are completely anti-technical, then the question is, okay, what can I do that supplements that need? And, I listening to Mark's presentation, so many of these things resonated, because as you put together that mosaic, listening to people within the industry who have sort of put these pieces together, my job today is hopefully to be able to give you some actionable thoughts or takeaways about how to go about this to be able to deliver ROI. So, if we have many clients at Blu Shark where resources are, I don't say unlimited, but $20,000 or more per month. That's awesome, and you can do a lot of good with it. But for other clients that are sort of like, hey, I have enough for a website, and I may only be able to spend $1,000 or more a month. What do I do? Because you can only do so much with an outside business or a vendor to do it. You're going to be carrying a lot of that weight. And so as I review sort of the landscape of what's possible, I'll start with a couple of things that I think that if you're not thinking about, you need to be thinking about. And we're going to go back after this and go into greater detail about each of the different levels of digital marketing, or each of the different sectors of digital marketing. But what I would say is the two things that if I'm sitting here talking to the audience today, one is almost outside of SEO. SEO is a great passion of mine, but reviews to your firm. We can talk about it and you can sort of hire buy software for it. But unless it becomes sort of a priority to be able to show that, to me, as I'm looking here today, looking at the landscape of what's there, one of the things that if you're looking about what's going to deliver ROI, extra reviews to firm. I hope it goes without saying based on everybody's knowledge of what's going on, but looking at reviews as a real fundamental way of moving the needle with relatively little money, meaning it's something that your internal people can do. The other is offices. As you look at your landscape, whether you have a single office or whether you have multiple offices, Moshe?
Yeah, I just want to dive into reviews for a moment. So if you just hold your thought on offices, you wanted me to make this interactive. So here you go.
Sure.
Folks are sitting there and they're like, yes, I know I need to get reviews. But when is the right time to ask a client for a review? How do I ask a client for a review? Is there a format or a process that you can recommend that you're doing for your larger clients that you can help people navigate or figure out like, okay, I know I need to do this, but what are the action steps for me to get
Well,
this done?
first thing I say, it has to become part of your DNA. It's not an afterthought. As the CEO of your firm, if you don't think of that as a priority, it's not going to happen. It has to be part of your DNA from the management all the way down to the lower level and thought of whether it's the intake. And Mark had mentioned this. I'm a big believer in a dedicated intake group. Whether it's a single person, I'm starting to experiment with a lot of offshore resources for that. But if you don't have a person thinking from moment one about reviews, because you may get people that call your firm that you give useful information to, but who don't end up signing, those people are possible reviews. And so to answer Mark's question more specifically, I don't think there is a silver bullet way to do this. It's not like if you do it this way, you're going to be successful. It's a constant pull and tug. As Nike says, just do it. And to me, as long as there is a process and you're constantly questioning and changing and improving. So whether you do something as a PI lawyer upon the actual disbursement of the money, great. Some people say, you know what, when you give them the final number before it's dispersed, better. Whether you're a criminal defense attorney and it's the moment you get that positive outcome, everybody's going to figure out what's right for them. But I think you have to own it. And I can tell you internally, I've had issues with staff over the years where they think it's cringe and they don't want to do it and it's not their job. And I've given it to my intake department and they've ended up not doing it. I think it needs to be designated from the top and with somebody's specific job description as the backstop to you so that you don't go, as I've gone 4 months and said, oh, we got so busy, we weren't focused on that. It needs to be something you do every day, one step at a time. And the second thing, before I get into sort of an overview or a 360, is offices. Huge news in the Google world. It has not fully sussed out, but it appears there has been a local algorithm update, which is good news for the players on here, assuming you're not the juggernaut in your space. Until recently, you probably know in your market, there was somebody that was always sort of showing up for citywide searches in your practice area. Google took a step in the last week to basically reduce that dominance. And one of the things that we have seen, and Mark mentioned this, was in the past, people would say, search near me. Like, Pete, where's a pizza place near me? Near me. What Google is essentially doing is taking away the need for the near me nomenclature in a search. And rather than saying, hey, this is the most authoritative person in the city, they're saying, who's authoritative but near me. Now, this may cess out. Google may not stay with it. It may be a temporary piece. We're not quite sure. But what we're seeing short term right now, and this is really good news if somebody's going up against a dominant player, is that proximity to searcher is even more important than it was just a handful of days ago. And I hope that is emboldening and lets people know, even if you've had what seems like an uphill battle, the fact that you could get what I call a pin on the map, something, and I love the fact that Mark still calls it GMB because I still do too, even though it's that Google's changed the name. But the idea that we're sitting with an opportunity where with a limited number of reviews and some authority that you're going to be able to compete based on proximity, to me, that's really good news for smaller players, less good news for larger players.
Yeah, Seth, I love that you're pointing out this algorithm change, and it's really exciting for folks who uh, were boxed out before. One of the people that, or one of the categories of law firm owners that are still boxed out, and I'm wondering if you have some insight to that, is firm owners who are operating a virtual practice. In Clio's legal trends report last year, Clio highlighted how ineffective office space is, how unimportant it is in the overall schematic of owning a firm, and how expensive it is to carry office space. So there's been, especially with the advent of COVID, where you can do everything virtually, even going to court. It's opened up a lot of opportunity for people to shed that burden of the office space that they had. So what is Google doing about people who don't have a physical location for their firm, and how do they show up in the lawyers near me conversation?
No, it's a great question, and it's one that I think is evolving. Google ironically just sent people home, almost indefinitely from their offices. So it's ironic that they're in one sense saying, "Hey, we don't need to come to the office." At the same sense, they're looking for lawyers to have a pin on the map and a location. My 2 cents is generally, if you have your main office and you have one office, it is something that Google is generally not looking to wipe out. Exceptions to every rule, but whether you have an office there part time, the issue is it's most like the sort of the saying. This is why we can't have nice things. There were people that went out and in California took 20 Regis offices overnight and just covered the state. That's not a great user experience for the end user. And so what Google's trying to do is balance that out. And they basically said, look, we don't have the resources to one by one go around and suss out what's a real office and what's a fake office. But what they have done is they basically index these WeWorks and Regises and said, hey, we don't want to be part of this sort of spamming of the landscape. And so, again, if you're a B2B lawyer, this doesn't really matter. Go get your office. Don't worry about the fact that it's not a brick and mortar office. You can take steps like having a file with your lease, photos, things. If you have an office within that space, that's even if it's just a small office, that's fine. The issue becomes as you try to scale, Google doesn't want you to be able to basically use a membership at an organization that allows you to sort of gain huge market share. And there are people who did it. And so I think it's one of those things like a pendulum that's going back and forth. And that Google has taken very extreme measures here that will, I think, at some point come back. But for the time being, Google holds the cards. We get some good news like, hey, you're going to get a shot against some of the juggernauts in town right now on Google Maps, but we get some bad news in that you may need an actual lease in order to be able to navigate the waters and not get yourself thrown off of the Google local ecosystem. Does that make sense? The sort of in the time we have remaining, I want to sort of talk about there are 4 areas of SEO, right? I talk about this all the time, right? Local, we're sort of talking about here, links, content, and technical. And when looking at ROI, what I ask people to think about and do is I'm asking people to do everything they can to figure out first, as I mentioned off the top, what do you love doing? And then from that, once you figure out what you love doing, figuring out how to leverage resources in the areas that you don't. So let's start with technical. Most people here aren't coding their own sites. I started with a $50 a month templated website. And that $50 a month templated website, I added each little piece that I knew how till the guy who ran this organization said, hey, you've outgrown this. We need you to move beyond. That said, when I've worked on things like links, that's one of those things where you can pay a ton of money. That content and links are the 2 things that cost a ton. And what I'm asking people to do is figure out how do you change your mindset from I'm living life to I'm living life in a way where links are part of it, just like reviews. If you focus on it and your team focuses on it, instead of, I just got an email right before I came on, some high school wants us to put our name on their t-shirts. I'm like, don't care about that, not from any point of view. From digital, what I care about is, can we get a link from the school? And changing your mindset that as you go around, you're looking for opportunities rather than just the way like, oh, they asked for money, great, here's money. Saying, hey, can we get a link from the school? content wise, rather than just doing a podcast. A lot of people have podcasts. Is a great one by our host Moshe here. Rather than doing that, taking that opportunity to get that work transcribed and double dipping. You have a great conversation, but when you're talking about, let's say, criminal defense in Indiana, now, as you do these different episodes and you have guests on, you're networking with those guests. Mark talked about your referral network. And at the same time, you're going to be going and allowing for rich content to be built in a way that if you were paying per page from an outside vendor, would be extremely expensive. And so I think that as we look at these things, looking at, when we look at technical, you don't need to be a genius to do this. You just need to know, hey, what's a title tag? Basic fundamental thing, been around for 10 years. Does your title tag reflect what you want to be found for? I believe, and I know Mark touched on this to a certain degree, Google is smart enough to figure out who your law firm is. If your site has all the basic fundamentals in place, I want to use things like title tag and meta description to be able to define what those pages are about to give you the best possible opportunity being found. So it's figuring out a little bit, just like with everything, malpractice insurance, your health insurance for your firm, whatever it is, you have to know enough to be dangerous. And I feel here, as you educate yourself in these areas and you say, okay, are these things right? Have I checked my page speed? What are the things that I can do as a checks and balances, whether you're doing it yourself, use an outside vendor, or something in between, that as you understand these things, you can continue to develop them. So putting technical aside, content. Content is one of those words where there's content everywhere. Some people love typing it. Some people love a podcast format. Some people are going to do a discussion with one of their associates or one of their admins and have that work transcribed. Whatever you do, these are the things that as an agency, we generally do at scale. We know that in order to get the needle to move, it takes a tremendous amount of fresh content. And so our job is to figure out within an organization or a firm, what is that person most likely to do? If we can find somebody who will interview with us, we create great, rich content. There are some people that they can't stand it. They hate doing that. So we have to go out and we have to sort of put together a written content strategy. And I think what I would love people to do is just figure out what are the areas they enjoy and which are the areas that really need to be outsourced. And as you figure that out, you can start with the easy stuff on a Fiverr and build up so you get to the point where you're like, hey, I'm going to have an in-house marketing person anyway. And that's where it gets interesting, because now this is one of those things like people say, should I use an agency? Should I work in-house? And the truth is, in-house is awesome if you can find somebody who brings these skill sets all together. So for me, what I ask people to do is to make a list of what needs to be accomplished as you listen to myself or Mark or others. And as you do that, start to pick off. And just like a growing law firm, I talk on one of my podcasts, Max Growth Live, that I host with Jay Ruane a lot. We talk about as a law firm, and I do this myself, you have an org chart. The org chart might have 15 places on it, and you only have 5 employees. Great. You know the areas you want to build into. That right now your HR person's also doing recruiting and is also the person who answers the phone. Whatever it is, however you're building it out, but you know you want to have a dedicated person answering the phone, and at some point you may want to dedicate a recruiter. And as you do that, I look at marketing very similarly. If you put down the things you need to have content, you need to have links, you need to work on the Google My Business that Mark touched on, putting rich content into that Google website of sorts. As you lay those pieces out, you can then start to layer that and find the resources, whether you're going to do it now internally, whether you're going to send it out, or in some cases say, you know what, I can't get to this yet. I can't do advanced link building. The sort of Mendoza line, if you're a baseball fan, that I always use is $350,000. Under $350,000, it's hard to put the resources towards advanced SEO, meaning off page, the development of content, the development of links coming in. All of those things are very, very resource intensive. And so I always say to people, figure out where you are in growth, figure out where you want to be, and start to put those building blocks in place, because those are the things that are going to allow you to sort of get to that place. And if you don't have that, if you don't think that way, in general, you can sort of end up focusing a lot on what you love, which has positive, and I'll mention that in a second. But it also gets you to ignore areas that are harder to turn the knob on. And when I say that is, as you go through and you figure out, I am a big believer that if you dig deep in one area, if you love to write and that's your thing, that is something where everything else with very, very basics on the other side, it will work out. There are going to be people that say, you know what, I'll have my basic 10 pages of content and I'm going to work like crazy to make sure everybody in my entire friends and business circle links to my website. And I'm going to have so many links, it's going to outplay my competition. As you figure those things out, now the best is both, but it's like anything else. You can't, I know that when I first started going to legal conferences and I saw Mark way back in the day, I'd come back and my head would start to explode because there were so many things I had to accomplish. And so I'm a huge believer, whether you're watching, as you go through this week with Moshe, that you sort of take notes and then continue to sort of like refine them. And by the end of the week, have a top 10 list. Some may be marketing, some may be intake. And that by the time you're finished, that there's a 3 that you're going to get to immediately, a 3 that are going to have to wait till the first quarter, maybe later on the second quarter, and then 4 of that top 10 where you're like, you know what, I don't have the resources right now to do this or the bandwidth. I'm going to have to put this to the side. Does that make sense, Moshe? So
Absolutely, it does. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I apologize. Wanted to make sure that my dog barking wasn't coming through in addition to yours. But yeah, that absolutely, it all makes sense. And I mean, even internally here, we don't, we do our marketing ourselves. We don't have a hired marketing agency, and we've had to focus on the content that we're really good at, and just haphazardly, do the SEO part because that's not our expertise. And eventually, actually, the plan for 2022 is to get much smarter and better at that. And I think that that's a good approach for somebody because you want them to focus on what they're good at. You want them to focus on where their skill set is. And you want it to be feel doable. Right. If you try, it's almost like I like to go back to the New Year's resolution stuff. Right. If you go into 2022 and you say, I'm going to lose 100 pounds this year, it becomes very difficult to work towards that goal because you haven't broken it down into something that I enjoy doing. It all sounds not fun. Not eating doesn't sound like fun. Exercising doesn't sound like fun. But if you approach content from what do I enjoy and you go and do that, for example, I do a podcast. I love being behind the microphone and talking. And video, I also enjoy. I'm not a video aficionado, so I'm not sold on video. In other words, I should hire a videographer to handle the video side of things. But I love being in front of a microphone and talking. And I cannot write for the life of me. Not that I can't do it. I'm just not good at it. It's not my zone of genius, so I'm not going to.
And it's never going to happen. So it's funny, life moment after 40 lawyers and now a digital, I finally got my own in-house videographer. It's been on my list. I go to the conferences. I was on the bottom 4. And so, there are moments where you're sort of like, fine, I finally got to that point. Now I can take that next step. I think you made another good point, which is knowing where your clients come from generally. A lot of different ways, right? We know people who get them all from referrals. Looking at something like your coaching world and the profit world, this is not something that people always know they need. So just like a B2B lawyer, SEO is not where I would spend $1. People call me all the time. I'm like, no, get a website. You can sort of do basic optimization, but you're going to get your money, for example, finding all the general counsels for every business in town. And just like you, the question is, are there lawyers out there that are looking to grow? The question is, can you be at the intersection of those two where paid social could be really, really effective? You're, pushing a podcast that will get people into a funnel sounds almost negative, but who listen to you to the point where they get to know you. I was at a conference recently and somebody is walking down the hall and says, I'm listening to you right now from my Max Growth Live, podcast. Like at that point, it sort of smiled. You're making a difference. the value that you're giving people, whether they become a paying client or not, at some point you hope that they do, otherwise you stay in business. But the idea is if you continue to give away that value and to get people sort of like, yes, then when they're ready for it, they're like, okay, I've gotten what I can sort of generally in this space, but I need that accountability. That's where, all of a sudden they become somebody part of your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true because, when I started the podcast, I just went on faith. Like eventually people are going to tune in. Eventually people will listen. And we recently had an episode where we interviewed Christina Gilbertson, and she shared her story of how our podcast and the information that she found on the podcast really changed the game for her with her law firm. She's now a coaching client, and she shares about that as well. But the reality is that we're out there and putting our stuff out there, and people are going to listen to it. They're going to hear it. They're going to resonate with something that you're doing. I mean, talk about meta. We're doing it right now, right? That's what this event is. I mean, yes, I just want to help everybody, but why did I decide to create this event? Why did I decide to run something the week before Christmas, right? Because I think that if this information is valuable to you, you're going to be more likely to interact with my company, with me in the future. And that's what this is all about. So you can do the same with your law firm. You can put content out there. It doesn't have to look the same as this. It could be, it could be anything. It could be writing, blog posting. It could be guest blog posting, right? You don't have to have your own blog. You could just be a guest somewhere else. You could do guest interviews on other people's podcasts. As a matter of fact, that's probably the fastest way to put content out there, because someone else built an audience and you're just kind of like renting it temporarily.
I would say the one cautionary tale, and I agree with everything you said, and is that there are certain niches, and I'll take criminal defense as one, because that's how I started my firm. Before we did PI or family or anything else, we were criminal defense and scaled to a substantial number there. That is one of those areas. Yes, you can do a podcast if you're a federal lawyer going nationally. When you're in a very local jurisdiction, you have to think about where the ROI is. I went and would go to like those meetups, those business breakfasts, and the odds of getting that from that world was relatively low. And that's part of the reason why I pushed in towards SEO and digital so hard, because it was such direct response. There are areas that go either way. For example, take family, where family law, where you may have a very long curve before somebody gets you, the story arc before they get to you in the buying cycle, where if somebody gets to feel that they know you through a local podcast, that can actually have a huge effect on this. But there's like, my feeling is looking at, and part of the reason that I love digital and search so much is that there's so much opportunity. In fact, Mark had that graph, right? The referral world and the sort of people who are searching outside and looking at each area. I would argue that trust and estates, which is still a B2C area, has 90% going through referrals, 10% going through SEO, but so few people do any SEO that the competition is so much less that 10% is more meaningful online, versus there's no secret in the PI or criminal world that that search is important, and plenty of people go to their friends for PI lawyers. They got to check, but the idea is there's still a portion out there on the other side, and figuring out based on resources, competition, your likes, and everything else in that bucket, figuring out where you want to push those resources at any given time. So
awesome. Seth, do you have a couple of minutes? There's some questions that came in the
sure.
comments here on Facebook.
Love it.
And I want to pull some up and address them. So we were talking about office addresses, and we've got a question here from Chris Austin, who's asking, so it's a bad idea to list office addresses at a Regis or similar. You had mentioned not being a part of an organization that just kind of like put your address in a bunch of different places. And I'm guessing that this is different, but I wanted to let you respond to Chris.
Okay, from an SEO point of view, if you're a B2B lawyer and you just want to have a place, who cares? Fine. But if you're trying to play the SEO game and local search, my answer in 99% of the time, Chris, is it depends. In this space, the answer is no. Do not put your address at a Regis. If you have any other option, anything, and I've had this. A buddy of mine from college called me up. He had 2 offices doing employment law in New York City in the office in New Jersey. And overnight, one of his offices got wiped out. We typed in the address, not even the suite number, the address of the building. And Mark showed that sort of knowledge bar, those sexy answers. It says, oh, that address is a virtual office. Google knows that. And that's a no-no at the moment. It has been for a while. If you have any choice of another place to go, don't put your office in a virtual office. If it's your only office and you're going to put a desk there, you can have a dossier and fight back. But I hate fighting an uphill battle. Anytime you can start without that is advantageous. So again, if it's a B2B lawyer and you just need a place to work and get your mail, God bless. But if you're playing the SEO or search game, I really recommend against it.
Awesome. And then there's a question from John. I think it's Phoebus is his name. There's actually a back and forth conversation that happened in the chat. Mark Homer responded to him as well. But I want to bring it up to you. See if you have a quick recommendation for him. Basically, he's got a brick and mortar office, and a competitor has listed his address as their address. And therefore, they're kind of like stealing his thunder, I guess.
Yeah, it's actually worse than that. And John, happy to reach out directly and hopefully help you navigate it. Two things. So one thing I didn't cover in this presentation is that another rule is that Google will only show in the search results, in the local search results, one business of one type at a single address. So if you're at 123 Sesame Street, only one criminal defense lawyer could be shown in that building. Next door, you could be another one. But if you have more than one in the building, they are going to suppress the second, third, and fourth results, which are almost impossible to see. So not only is this person stealing your thunder by putting a fake office there, which you can flag and say, this doesn't exist here, and with some escalation, potentially get some eyeballs on. But if this person is more sophisticated than you with more authority, they may actually suppress your listing. So it's not like, hey, we'll be 1-2. You won't even be seen at all meaningfully. And so it is very important to get it removed in any way, shape, or form you can. Don't know from this question exactly what's going on, but it sounds like something that pushing Google to say, hey, this is not real would be very, very helpful.
Awesome, Seth. Very good. We answered the couple of questions that came in. I appreciate it. And as always, your content was incredible without the slides. Okay, let's see. There is actually another question that just came in. We'll bring it up. But folks, we're also going to wrap this up shortly. So we'll just give you an opportunity to answer one more, and then we'll close this out. So Daniel's asking, how do we deal with 2 offices or more in Google My Business?
Well, I mean, that's what you do. I don't know what it means, how do you deal with it, but you can open multiple offices if they're real. If they're Regis's and you're just saying, hey, I paid for my Regis membership and now I'm going to put them in Austin and Dallas and Houston, Google will say, no, that's not going to work. But if you have 2 offices, Marriott has lots of hotels. They have a Google listing for each and every one of them, and you're allowed to do that. So that is something that is perfectly allowed, and that you have to start from 0 on reviews, so it's not nothing, and it's not like they pop immediately. That a new office, and something, if you've heard me speak before, brand new websites. Let's say you start a new business, Moshe. That website is not going to get indexed well by Google immediately. They put you something called the sandbox. That sandbox could be 3 months, it could be as much as 6 or 9 months before it gets meaningful love. We're seeing a similar effect on these Google listings. So don't expect to place a listing and immediately say, oh, we're open for business, all is great. It may take a while for Google to like, know, and trust that listing.
Awesome. Seth, thank you very much for your time and input here today. It's always a pleasure having you on. Folks, we're going to, and I got to back up on these slides, but we're going to share the replay as well as any links. So I'm going to ask Seth's team to give us his slide deck that he was going to use. We're going to share that with you on the replay page. But this is really important. If you just caught us on Facebook Live and you didn't register for the event, you're not going to be able to access the replays and the deliverables that we're giving out. We want to make sure that we have your information so we can send it to you. So you want to make sure to go to profitwithlaw.com/planning replay, register for that. If you already registered for this event, then you're all good. We're going to send you the replays and the deliverables tomorrow morning. We're going to do that each day. So this event is going on for 4 days. This is the end of day one. Day two will be tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have some amazing lineup. We're going to have Jordan Ostroff from Legalese Marketing. And he's big on the sales process. They help you with really streamlining your intake process, automating it, making sure that you're not dropping the ball along the way. He's going to talk about the sales process you need to have. But that's going to be followed by Maddie Martin, somebody really special, Smith AI. She has been, everyone in the industry knows who she is. She's all over the place, but really she's got amazing content on your intake and what mistakes we make in the intake process. So she's going to talk about intake mistakes, win-win solutions for small firm lawyers and clients. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with David Nagel. David Nagel is going to talk about how to create a signature sales process that closes 50% more clients. So really excited about the lineup. And we're going to have that kickoff tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. Now, the one thing I want to share with you is just a little bit about what you can do if you want more help than just a free video session at the end of the year to really keep you accountable, help you make a plan, and keep you actionable throughout the year. So this is not for everybody, but if you've been trying to grow your firm and you find that it's going slower than you'd like, maybe you're putting in way too many hours, or you're taking home way too little income. When we have people come into our world, often they're working in excess of 60 hours, maybe as much as 80 hours a week. Their family life is suffering, their personal life is suffering, they're ignoring themselves, and they're trying to make traction, but they just can't seem to make it happen. And so on top of that, they're working all these hours, but then they're not even bringing home enough to really make a difference in their lives. We call that a struggling law firm owner. And we don't want to see you struggling. We want to see you be successful. We want to see you be proud. We want to see you be free to be able to make choices in your life. And therefore, we'd like to flip the script for you. So if you want to find out how our clients become proud and free law firm owners, you can do that by booking a free coaching session with one of our coaches. It's absolutely free, no strings attached. They will offer you, at the end of the call, they will offer you to join our Law Firm Growth Elite program. It's an 18-month program. It is not cheap, but it is worth it, because if we can create massive results in your business, if we can help you do that over 18 months, then this is a drop in the bucket for that result. But the coaching session itself, it's real. It's not just a veiled sales pitch. You will walk away from it invigorated, inspired. And this is actually what we're going to do, right? On this call, we're going to help you create a crystal clear vision for your ultimate law firm success and the perfect lifestyle that you'd like your firm to provide for you. We're going to help you uncover the hidden challenges that may be sabotaging the growth of your firm and keeping you working way too many hours. And finally, you're going to leave the session renewed, re-energized, inspired to turn your firm into a highly profitable revenue-generating machine that practically runs itself. So if this sounds good for you, if it sounds exciting, if it sounds like something that can really help you move the needle, we don't have any spots left in December. We're booking out January, but go to profitwithflow.com/free coaching. Grab a spot on the calendar. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions. You got to fill out a little application, but it will be worth it, because when you are done, you're going to have a great, phenomenal experience with one of our coaches, and ultimately, maybe you'll be working with me.
Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.